v.h.s.x? What do you mean?
Alright everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. I wanted to talk about the Fog Vials and why I think that they're not gutted, useless, or bad at all. Personally, I think that players are overreacting, as I believe that they still have a use, but players are just not creative enough. The initial release of the Fog Vials was incredibly broken, and as I've covered in multiple different videos, which I'll link them at the end of this one, the Fog Vials were able to completely remove every single form of information that the killer has in order to track survivors. This includes visuals, audio, scratch marks, and without them, it's impossible for players to keep up. Alongside the infinite charges making it easy to just end chase without any effort anytime they wanted. This was in combination with the accessibility issues it raised for people with sight issues, and ironically enough, which I made this point before, if there was a killer equivalent such as like Hex 2 Can Play, which for those who don't know is a Chucky perk that if a survivor stuns you twice, every stun after that will completely blind them with a flashlight effect for 1.5 seconds. So if this perk wasn't like a hex totem and instead it was like a universal add-on that every single killer can just equip, and it doesn't have like that sort of 2 stun and then it starts to activate type of thing, just say out of the box, it will always, every time that they stun you with a pallet, they always get blinded. Instead of 1.5, let's say we make it 5 seconds or 10 seconds even. Let's be generous, make it 10 seconds. Right? I can guarantee you that that would be completely removed, nerfed, reworked the next day. Guaranteed. Being blinded does deafen the audio and also completely covers the entire screen. So my question is, what if survivor players had to experience a flashlight blind effect for 10 seconds straight? Without even, with just getting stunned. Like just stunning the killer, and they're just blinded and deafened for like 10 seconds. I guarantee you would not last longer than a day. But what's interesting to me is that the Fog Vials function the same exact way. You can't see, you can't hear, and you don't know where to go. But apparently, that was fine, right? Apparently that's fine. Now, there's a couple of aspects that I want to talk about when it comes to the Fog Vials, and it's one that maybe isn't as well known. But if people had 2 survivors holding a Fog Vial, right, with infinite charges, they were fully capable of stacking the actual smoke effect. Believe it or not, I don't know if I haven't really seen people talk about it, but I've seen it happen where I've had 2 people when it first released, they would drop a smoke. It was already super difficult to see through. Then they would drop an additional one on top of it, and it got even thicker. The smoke would just stack on top of itself and get even harder to see through. I don't know why that was in the game. So we can talk about that. And maybe it was the iridescent add-on, right? But let's keep in mind here that blood points are not hard to get. Iridescent add-ons are not hard to find. And I've seen that sort of argument before when it came down to talking about the blood point economy and oh, it's just harder to get iridescent add-ons. But that only is applicable to newer players or maybe people that aren't really, you know, sticking on to that one survivor or whatever have you. But it's not difficult to get iridescent add-ons. It's not difficult to get syringes. It's not difficult to get these items. Especially with the Bloodweb improvements, they can easily just like shred through multiple pages of Bloodwebs and be able to collect a few and use them in matches. So that's really not going to be that hard to find. It's not really a point. I do want to address another counterpoint as well that I've seen before. It's the idea that Fog Vials would prevent the overabundance of toolboxes and medkits being brought into every match. And I completely disagree with this point for a few reasons. Firstly, players that want to bring a medkit or toolbox are still going to bring those things. And we have to keep in mind that medkits and toolboxes have multiple purposes in a match. So for example, if we're talking about a medkit, you can heal someone else, you can heal yourself, and you can also have an insta-heal if you just apply an add-on for that. Basically meaning you can get 2, maybe 3 people healed up, or even yourself once or twice. If you have a few charges left, that's another heal on top of that. Just instantly. Just for free, you know? And toolboxes function the same thing. Toolboxes function in a similar way. Because it can be used to quickly repair generators, depending on the toolbox you have. That can be an additional 32% of a generator. Or even more if you stack more charges on top of it. You're essentially having about half of a gen done with one item in a couple of seconds. Automatically filling it up for you, with that, saving you so much time on a gen. You can also use a toolbox to break a hook, preventing the killer from progressing their actual objective. Hook states are important for killers. Because obviously 2 to go, the third one they're out, right? So if you just prevent them from actually being removed from the lobby, from just, or at least getting one step closer to being removed from the lobby, that's massive. Toolboxes and medkits provide incredible value. But if we take into account that Fog Vials can only do one thing, and that one thing, well, being to completely end chases with the press of a button, blinding and deafening killers, as well as having no scratch marks, it's already doing too much on its own. The difference between the Fog Vials on release and the toolboxes and medkits is that toolboxes and medkits can be directly countered with things that are already available to killers, and to all killers. So for example, if they're using a toolbox and they already dump all their charges into the generator, it is possible that a killer could have brought some slowdown and could remove that progress right after. Say he had pain res, or say he has pop or something, you at least have an answer to that with a perk, or with kicking the gen and it regressing. They have like gen kick perks as well. Same thing applies to a medkit. If a survivor is healing themselves quickly or is healing somebody else quickly, a killer can come by and M1 or use their ability to damage that survivor so that they once again lose the health state, sort of reversing that effect. But Fog Vials don't have that. There is no direct answer to basic information mechanics being taken away from the player. It's basically impossible. The only direct counter would be just having Franklins equipped. But not every single player is putting on Franklins. And Franklin's was, quite frankly, was gutted. Is it still as good as it could be? No. Is it bad? I mean, somewhat. I wouldn't say unusable, but definitely not as good as it used to be. That's how I see the Fog Vials too. They have a use. So, what I mean, what the whole point I'm trying to make here, or another point that I'm trying to make here, is that other items already do exist. And those items are keys and maps. The funny thing is that people make the point that there would have been less medkits and toolboxes, but at the end of the day, people that want to bring those items are going to bring those items. And let's keep in mind as well that, like I just said, keys and maps existed, and nobody used them. Nobody used them, and some of them had pretty great effects. But the problem is that these items are completely outclassed by the medkit and the toolbox. So it begs the question, why does an item need to be broken in order for it to be seen as useful? As we've seen with the Fog Vial on release, the second it was nerfed, the second it was brought down to where it should have been from the very beginning, it got gutted, and I can't use this anymore. It's terrible. And I have to ask, like, why does it need to be so unbalanced for it to be playable? It then starts to shift your focus for a bit, because it makes you think, wow, are toolboxes and medkits a little too strong? Is that possible? Because in order to try to compete with a medkit and a toolbox, you need the item to be completely ridiculous. That says a lot about this game's balancing. But touching back on the lack of creativity from the survivors who are not using the Fog Vials anymore, I do want to make a point that most survivors that were most likely using this Fog Vial in its ridiculous state, I should say, were most likely throwing the fogs directly in front of the killer in the middle of a chase, like just directly in their face, leaving no room for error for on the killer's perspective, as they were essentially right up against the killer. Like, you can be like sniffing the back of their dome up close. I've seen that happen before, but I've also seen other players that were smart with it as well. And maybe that's why it was such a divide, I guess you could say, when it came down to the perspective of the Fog Vial, because everybody had their own unique experience with their opponent. Like, some of them were just not very good at the game, and therefore were just using the smoke in the middle of chase, while other people were using it extremely effectively, on top of the fact that they can stack with one another, so the fog can get thicker with each smoke use. And then on top of that, they were just more experienced players and got a lot more use out of it because they had more hours. I want to make the point that the survivors using it pretty much directly in somebody's face is just not going to get any value at all. And that's why I think that maybe that's why some claim they never had this experience of the Fog Vials needing the nerf. But the crazy thing is that we have shown evidence on our own. We've had multiple channels here, and myself included, showing how ridiculously difficult it is to even see or hear or do anything to counter these damn Fog Vials. So I do believe that the Fog Vials do have a use. I want to make that clear. Unlike the Fog Vials, I do want to make that clear. In the same way that survivors would use something like the old key for the free wall hacks, is the same way that this Fog Vials can be used. Within a dedicated build, and even paired with distortion, arguably could allow for 2 free additional charges without having to be in chase to use it. I also think it can be used as a line of sight blocker to travel in separate directions, or even using it with other perks like Red Herring or even Quick and Quiet and Head On to conceal themselves and land stuns they might not have gotten otherwise. I think Survivor players jump the gun and don't see the possibilities for fun and interesting gameplay instead of relying on things that are broken instead. The thing is that these items have existed, like key with wall hacks has existed, and people have created builds around that. Maps were used for finding totems and things like that, right? And people probably use those for boon builds or breaking the totems to counterforce. So I think it's gotten out of hand. I think that people just need to get used to trying out unique things instead of only using what's meta. And that in itself is already a big issue within the game. I also believe that if the Fog Vial either released in the same state it is now, or if they had brought back the original like Halloween event Fog Crystal kind of thing, both of those would have been much better alternatives. Because the Fog Crystal didn't even spread out when it was deployed. It would just be dropped and it would just go. And you can stand in it, you can't see or really see anything, but once you're out of it, it didn't have any lingering effect and it didn't really cause any issues. But I also want to talk about the current state of the Fog Vials, because I think it's in a good spot. And I also want to talk about a quick comparison to other games that have smoke bombs in them. Good examples are, for example, Rainbow Six Siege, right? A tactical shooter has smokes. And what are they used for? Blinding the line of sight. They were used to try to travel through areas or try to catch someone off guard. Let's talk about let's talk about Apex Legends, who also has an operator, I guess you could say, or a legend, or whatever you want to call it, a character that has smoke bombs in their kit. Like, that's their thing. They go popping smoke, and then they like run off, and they use that to block lines of sight. You can even talk about Call of Duty, Fortnite. I mean, any shooter that's had any smoke bomb can have made use of these smoke bombs before. They were never meant to be insane items. Like, they were meant to be a way to block lines of sight, to be able to travel through without being spotted, and to divert the view of the enemy, right? So in this case with DBD, it's really good against those ranged killers, as I've said. When I was using these smoke bombs in the 2v8, I didn't find an issue with it. I thought it was pretty good. If you encounter Huntress or Death Slingers and things like that, and you're trying to cross somewhere where there's no cover, dropping a smoke and trying to run off in a different direction could potentially allow you to not get hit. And a lot of the players that are playing Huntress in 2v8 are probably not going to land their shots anyway. But that's sort of been my rant for the most part, I guess you could say. My whole thing. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube things. Check out the links in the description for some ways to support the channel. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Let me know what you think in the comments. Consider following on Twitch and the TikTok. See you guys next time.